The name of the institution which hosts this event and where I work, the Institute of Musicology of the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts, is kind of misleading, or at least incomplete. Namely, the institution should actually be called the Institute of Musicology and Ethnomusicology, because both these disciplines are represented at the institute, and neither is subordinated to the other one. But while musicologists and ethnomusicologists have worked side by side for decades at the institute, there was little actual collaboration between them. The main reason for this division is the fact that the system of music education in Serbia firmly separates their realms of research, art music and traditional music respectively. Things have only started to change in the past decade or so with the influx of young researchers and the initiation of new research projects which encompassed both disciplines. One of the main meeting points between them is the area of sound studies, which has been interdisciplinary since its inception, encompassing the work of musicologists, ethnomusicologists, sound artists, ethnologists, anthropologists, geographers, architects, sociologists, etc. The common goal of all these scientists is to understand global cultures through their relationship to sound, regarded as a medium, in order to emphasize the context and active participation. Thus, the emphasis is on ambient as something we move in and interact with, instead of a detached external soundscape, and also on the awareness of human agency and the listener's personal oral histories. French sociologist Jean-Paul Thibault emphasizes that the term soundscape refers to, quote, extracting from the sonic environment what is perceived as an aesthetic unity, end of quote. Auditory environment is defined as, quote, sound being a part of our surroundings, of our in situ experience, end of quote. While ambient sound, quote, concerns the pervasive noises of living in a society and forms of social and emotional life, end of quote. The celebration of UNESCO World Day for Audiovisual Heritage has provided me with an opportunity to share my experience with making and preserving audiovisual documents with respect to the goals of applied musicology and ethnomusicology, more specifically, an engaged approach to community. Between 2014 and 2016, I made about 100 field recordings in Savamala, a central Belgrade quarter at the right bank of the river Sava. The research was conducted for the benefit of two projects that I was working on at the time. The main project of the Institute of Musicology, called Serbian Musical Identities within Local and Global Frameworks, Traditions, Changes, Challenges, financed by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Serbia, and an international trilateral project directly related to the field of sound studies, City Sonic Ecology, Urban Soundscapes of Bern, Ljubljana and Belgrade, financed by the Swiss National Science Foundation. Within this latter project, me and my colleagues studied the ways in which various sound manifestations produced social relations, and we focused on the cultural dimensions of listening. Our additional goals were to learn more about the world we live in, pay attention to hitherto neglected senses and sensations, observe how sounds police our everyday living, and finally think about ways how we could create more pleasant sound environments. The results of this project were published in 2 issues of the journals Musicological Annual in Ljubljana in 2016 and the journal Musicology here in Belgrade in 2017. The period when I made the majority of my recordings roughly matches the rise and fall of Savamala, concerning various changes and challenges that affected that part of Belgrade over a relatively short time span. The beginning of the observed period saw some successful attempts to revitalize and transform Savamala by developing the private sector and encouraging local residents and the visitors to the area to reclaim this urban zone by means of cultural and artistic practices. However, some of the tendencies that I observed in my articles published in 2016 and 17, where I predicted that Savamala as an independent cultural oasis would soon disintegrate, have indeed materialized, much quicker than I expected. Namely, Savamala became a battleground of conflicting business interests after the Serbian government kick-started a grandiose top-down project, Belgrade Waterfront, aimed at transforming the right bank of the river Sava into an imposing residential and business hub. I will now describe this rise and fall of Savamala as documented by my recordings. Savamala is the oldest urban quarter in Belgrade, rich in tradition, history, and heritage. Its name is a compound of two words, the name of the river Sava and the Turkish word Mahala, contracted to Mala, meaning a neighborhood or a small settlement. It is situated under the Belgrade fortress alongside the southern bank of the river Sava. During the decades of the Communist Party rule after World War II, with the state-controlled industrialization of the country and the gentrification, many warehouses, depots, factories, and other industrial facilities were built in Savamala. After the Yugoslav wars of the 1990s and the transition towards liberal capitalism, with numerous unsuccessful privatizations of former socialist industrial giants, a lot of these industrial facilities were abandoned, neglected, or ruined. However, the past decade witnessed some successful attempts to revitalize and transform Savamala by encouraging local residents and the visitors to the area to reclaim this urban zone by means of certain cultural and artistic practices, which fostered a utopian vision of Savamala as a leisurely, artistic, carefree, yet socially engaged part of Belgrade. The reculturalization project in Savamala started approximately 15 years ago as a bottom-up process, thanks to the enthusiasm of cultural activists who were financially supported by various European funds. Savamala was a suitable site for such efforts because of the existence of numerous abandoned and semi-ruined objects, which could be reconstructed and repurposed. Their vision was that everyone in Savamala, including the working class and the socially excluded Romas, would benefit from these strategies in one way or another, because they would contest the notoriety of Savamala, stimulate local entrepreneurship, and bring visitors to this area. The first example of an object of industrial heritage turned into a cultural center was Grad, meaning city, European Center for Culture and Debate. It was in 2009. This cultural center is still active to this day. The next stop was the 2013 Goethe Institute Project of Excellence, Urban Incubator, which encompassed 10 local and international projects from the fields of art, architecture, urbanism, and social engagement. The year 2013 also saw the opening of the imposing new edifice called Mixer House in Karađorđevo Street, which served as a multifunctional concert venue, cafe, nightclub, exhibition space, conference venue, marketplace, etc. Very soon, many new cafes, fast food parlors, beer pubs, nightclubs, etc. opened in the vicinity of Grad and Mixer House. So, in the short span of a few years, in the early 2010s, the entire subculture formed in the heart of Savamala. When I first spoke to the protagonists of the bottom-up initiatives in Savamala, they confirmed my initial hypothesis that the efforts to reculturalize and rebrand this ugly, noisy, smelly, derelict, polluted, and neglected part of the city had to start with sound. The general idea was, quote, if we cannot make Savamala look and smell nice, then at least we can make it sound nice, end quote. In other words, the intervention in the soundscape had a crucial role for creating this new affective community in terms of identity building and politics of belonging. Since the traffic noise could not be removed or ignored, the entrepreneurs from Savamala decided to promote this noise as something cool, that is, as a symbol of living in a traditionally urban zone. Over the duration of the project City-Sonic Ecology, my methodology was primarily based on fieldwork, which is ethnographic documentation of the sound topography of Savamala. Aside from recording everyday life in Savamala, I recorded 2 festivals that took place in this area. Mixer Festival of Contemporary Creativity, 3 editions in 2014, 15, and 16, and the Belgrade Summer Festival, or BELEF, which doesn't always take place there, but just occasionally. In the case of Mixer Festival, the alteration of Savamala's soundscape and the entire ambience occurred because this area was occupied by the festival. Given that the sound of a festival taking place in Belgrade was the subject of a thorough investigation for the first time, I had to devise a research strategy on my own. I opted for a hybrid methodology, and the type of information that I gathered has consisted of the following. First, quantitative research and structured interviews with residents and visitors of Savamala. Second, extensive audio recordings conducted during the festival editions. 3. Sound walks in Savamala. 4. Video documentation. And 5. Participant observation. While I could not fully pursue participant observation due to the fact that the community of festival goers only formed during a few days each summer, over the course of multiple editions of the festival, I did play the dual roles of an ordinary reveler and a researcher. Our ultimate goal was to have all audio and video documentation related to the project City-Sonic Ecology collected and scored in an online audiovisual archive. But, for various reasons, this plan never materialized. So all recordings that I made are now stored on my personal computer and external hard drives. Mixer Festival relocated to Savamala in 2012, and its main theme was the revitalization of Savamala. The aim of the festival organizers was to help Savamala regain its long-forgotten status as a cultural and social center of Belgrade. The festival featured projects encompassing design, architecture, urbanism, visual arts, music, new media, education, and environmental protection, with interventions in public space, exhibitions, workshops, talks, roundtables, and performances. The music program of the festival consisted of concerts and DJ sets with performers from 8 countries. This effort coincided with general festivalization of Belgrade, a spectrum of changes in musical life conditioned by the increase in the number and importance of festivals, meant to cater to various needs, and to make the strongest possible impression in the shortest possible time, as said by Zygmunt Bauman. 2 other important concepts related to the festivalization of Savamala are the concept of noising, which implies an intentional appropriation of public space and sound on various festival occasions, and sociability, which refers to the lifestyle of the people in the Balkans accompanied by jubilant noise. I will now play a few minutes of my recordings of the 2015 edition of Mixer Festival. This particular recording was made on a Sunday, the last day of the festival. You will hear traffic noise as I descended from the so-called Branko bridge over the river Sava down to Savamala, and then the sound of the festival.
Nove prodavci stoje već danima ovdje, prodaju svoje rukotvorine. Zarade po nešto. Da firme s obzirom da samo njih dvoje. Prosti mi ti gore i ti dole. Tesno se čuva neki mraz. Čujemo šavor marketa. Gleda se čuje muzika iz kafića Savamala. Ja više ću samo sebi to. Desno je klub Berliner, živa svita. Sada do miksališta da vidimo da li je završen nastup Kora Vivo Vox.
The fact that the efforts to transform Savamala paid off in a relatively short time span, less than 5 years, garnered lots of publicity and received very good press, both domestically and internationally. In 2015, the Business Insider listed Savamala among the 12 coolest neighborhoods in Europe, stating that, quote, the Savamala district continues to grow as one of Serbia's cultural centers, end of quote. And British paper The Guardian published a report stating that, quote, Creativity is blossoming in Belgrade, where a riverside cultural hub has sprung up into derelict mansions and warehouses, led by free thinkers looking to the city's future." End quote. However, this thriving cultural hub soon hit two major obstacles. The first challenge was the European migrant crisis in the summer of 2015, which resulted in an influx of migrants from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and other Asian and African countries, with Serbia serving as a transit country on the refugees' route towards the European Union. The refugees found shelter in the area of Savamala due to its immediate vicinity to the main railway and the intercity bus stations. While one would expect that the owners of clubs and venues in Savamala would complain about the presence of migrants nearby, they actually became actively involved in helping the refugees, with the extension of Mixer House at Mostarska Street, called Mixalište, as the central point. Opened in January 2015 as an ice rink and an open-air concert venue, Mixalište transformed into the Refugee Aid Serbia's main center for collecting and distributing aid, providing medical help, workshops for children, toilets, shower points, and washing machines, points for charging mobile phones, etc. The very same energy and drive, the collective affect that used to form in Savamala with respect to its cultural and entertainment offer, was now channeled into this local activism, and the residents and visitors of Savamala were encouraged to sympathize with the migrants' plight and to volunteer to help. However, the second challenge proved to be lethal. It was a grandiose construction project, Belgrade Waterfront, headed by Serbian government in partnership with the Eagle Hill Group from Abu Dhabi, aiming to turn the right bank of the river Sava into a business hub for the Western Balkans. This ongoing project is all about commercial and real estate business interests. Currently, it is the second largest mixed-use complex under construction in Europe, projected to include 7,000 residential units, luxury hotels, 2,000 offices, the largest shopping mall in Southeast Europe, Belgrade Park, etc. The project's central point is Kula, or the Tower of Belgrade, a new city landmark standing at 168 meters tall. In order to start developing Belgrade waterfront, the city officials' first endeavor was to depopulate the right bank of the Sava, that is, to forcefully resettle the poor, the Romas, railway workers, refugees, etc. The second step was to house the Belgrade waterfront project in the imposing building known as Geozald, right next to the Mixer House. The owners of Mixer House and other clubs rightfully feared that they would be displaced by the flashy new development, and their fears were confirmed in September 2015 when some of the cafes and pubs in Savamala were demolished without prior notice, in order to clean land for construction work. Soon the soundscape of Savamala was enriched by yet another layer, the sound of heavy machinery. Then, on the 24th of April 2016, a group of men wearing masks destroyed several family-owned businesses and a restaurant in the Hercegovačka Street, while the volunteers in Mixalište received notice that the Refugee Aid Center would be demolished within 48 hours, and it was indeed flattened on the 26th of April 2016, nominally because it did not have all official permits. The Mixer team then relocated the Refugee Aid Center to a nearby address at Gavrila Principa Street, but soon had to close it down as well. Mixer Festival was held for the fifth and final time in Savamala in June 2016 under the slogan Sensitive Society. At that point, both the festival organizers and the audience were unaware that this edition of the festival would be the last one in Savamala. Listening to the sound walks recorded during the Mixer Festival in 2014, 15 and 16, I was reminded of the infectious optimism and the visionary spirit of the festival organizers. Unfortunately, their idea to turn Savamala into a permanent fixture on the map of Belgrade nightlife and the tourist hotspot only materialized for a few years, before it was halted by the top-down business interests. A major lesson learned was that Mixer Festival and other independent initiatives, in spite of their good intentions, Visionary ideas, regional networking, and private and international support could not survive without the support or backing from the Serbian officialdom, because they were exposed to political whims and competing business interests. As the Belgrade waterfront project has continued to spread, it has gobbled up all neighboring edifices. In order to free up the space, the main railway station in Belgrade, built in 1885, a historical building, was permanently closed on the 1st of July 2018 and repurposed to become a museum. The majority of nightclubs, cafes, and other venues in Savamala have also been closed down, and the protagonists of the bottom-up reculturalization effort, the independent cultural entrepreneurs who revived and rebranded Savamala, were purged out of the area and their work erased from the face of earth. Hence, my recordings of the cultural events and vivid nightlife in Savamala have remained as rare evidence that once there was an urban cultural hub at the riverbank. At the same time, they serve as a testament to the ever-changing situation in the present-day transitional Serbia.
Hello everybody, it's a great pleasure for me to take part to this conference in this UNESCO World Day of Audiovisual Heritage. I'm a research fellow in ethnomusicology at the University of Cagliari in Sardinia, Italy. I made research in my homeland in Cuba and Equatorial Guinea. I'm very interested in audiovisual ethnomusicology, and more generally I make extensive use of audiovisual technology during my research. The first point I would like to stress in my paper is that I use video differently depending on the purposes of my work. I argue we can identify four main different approaches in the field of audiovisual ethnomusicology. We can use the video to capture data for further analysis. We can produce ethnographic documentary, which is a very effective way to disseminate our work to different kind of audience. We can use audiovisual also in public ethnomusicology project to present the result of our research to a non-specialistic audience. And finally, we can use video for educational purposes. Today I would like to focus mainly on the last two cases. All the video you will see were conceived by me. In some cases they are homemade in the sense that I showed the video and follow by myself all the creation process from the pre-production to the post-production. In other cases, I collaborate with professional video studios, working in team with camera operators, editors, After Effects professional, software developers, speakers, and so on. The first example I would like to show you is a video I made for the CD-ROM attached to a book on improvised poetry in Sardinia. The video aim is to describe how a very complex metrical form called mutetu longu is performed by the poet. The mutetu longu consists of two sections. The first has 8 lines and the second 2. The real meaning of the poem is presented in the second section, and each word of this section must rhyme with each line contained in the first section. The video shows how the poets perform the mutetu, combining the line coming from the two sections.
Però prima ti ha posto in croce quando rotto ti piantare in moi te fortunata da contempli e da bellanta sul re dei giusto Cassomini sempre si separa da quando tu supremo estingiò e Poi sul mondo gente più tolti. Poi sul mondo gente più tolti, sono dei gustos antigos castiadores e si incara sempre a sa luce sus occhi e ingenuo di renditori. Ingenuo di renditori si incara sempre de sus occhi a sa luce, sono dei gustos antigos castiadores, pero prima di apostoli pero prima di apostoli crucis, sono dei gustos castiadores antigos, si incara sempre de sus olhos a luce, a todos de antigos.
The second example is a video I made for my students, so for educational purposes. It focused on canto a tenore, the most important multi-part singing tradition in Sardinia, which was inscribed on the UNESCO representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanities in 2008. The aim of the video is to present a musical form called Boghenote, showing both the lyrics, sung by the soloist, and the structural form of the song.
Care orfano ido isconsolado, pasos ardi esquinzo, coro abranto terra forte gentile, custo canto e su saludo chi non t'appoda e su saludo chi non t'appoda e su saludo. Care orfano ido isconsolado, pasos ardi esquinzo, abranto, pasos ardi esquinzo, pasos ardi sospira nel oro profumado, un giardino d'una rosa camottando, un giardino d'una rosa camottando, oh il giardino
Let's move now to some professional production. I am the scientific director of two multimedia and technological museums focusing on different types of multi-part singing in Sardinia. To create an installation that allows the visitor to listen to the single voices, we make professional audiovisual recording using multi-camera and multi-track technologies. As you can see in this video from the MEOC Museum from Agius in the north of Sardinia, the visitor can select or mute individual voices by clicking on the figure of the singer in the controller. I use the footage shoot to this kind of installation to edit a simple video aimed to show to my student how the timbre of the lowest voices in the canto a tenore can change according from the village. The timbre of the voices is one of the elements the singer used to express their local identity, and they can change very much from a village to another.
Boom, boy, boom, boom. Boom, boy, boom, boom. Boom, boy, boom, 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 boom.
Another project I worked on is Muspos. Muspos is an exhibition of traditional Sardinian musical instrument owned by Orlando Marija, who is a well-known musician, instrument maker and collector. My contribution as a scientific director of the museum has been twofold. On the one hand, I made a new classification of all the instruments according to the revision of the Hornbostel sax classification proposed by Febo Guizzi. On the other hand, I try to find a solution to the problem that affect the majority of the museums of musical instruments. The fact that those objects created to produce sound can usually be observed but not listened to. We recorded Orlando playing all his instruments and create an installation that works as a sort of virtual tour of the exhibition. The last example is a video contained in one of the DVD of the Encyclopedia of Sardinian Music, an encyclopedia composed of 16 volumes, 9 DVD and 7 CD, I co-edited and directed in 2012. This video focuses on launeddas, that is the most important Sardinian traditional instrument. It is a triple pipe clarinet, and the aim of the video is to explain the grammar that leads the dance music accompaniment.
Nella musica per launeddas la parte più importante del repertorio è senza dubbio quella delle suonate di accompagnamento del ballo. Ognuno degli strumenti che compongono la famiglia delle launeddas, i concertus, sviluppa una propria suonata differente dalle altre, ma tutte rispettano una logica comune. Vediamo dunque come è fatta una suonata a ballo. Si inizia sempre con una introduzione a ritmo libero che permette al suonatore di verificare l'accordatura dello strumento e ai ballerini di prepararsi. L'introduzione sfocia senza interruzione nel ballo vero e proprio. L'intera suonata è costituita da una successione continua e ininterrotta di frasi musicali che prendono il nome di nodas. Come dei mattoncini, le nodas si succedono una dopo l'altra, creando l'architettura della nostra suonata. Tutte le nodas sono caratterizzate da una struttura tripartita, ovvero sono divise in 3 elementi, l'ultimo dei quali, denominato serrada, ha il senso di chiusura della frase. Esistono 2 tipi principali di nodas. Nel primo tipo, ognuno dei 3 elementi che la costituiscono può essere ulteriormente suddiviso in 3 parti. Nel secondo tipo i 3 elementi sono suddivisi in 2 parti. In alcune nodas tutti e 3 gli elementi che la compongono sono simili tra loro. Vi sono invece nodas in cui solo 2 dei 3 elementi si somigliano. Ma come devono essere concatenate le nodas per realizzare un buon ballo? La tradizione tramanda sia la melodia delle nodas principali, sia l'ordine in cui queste devono essere realizzate. Suonare rispettando la sequenza corretta viene detto sonaja e scala. All'interno di questo insieme di regole che sembrano molto vincolanti, il suonatore ha la libertà di improvvisare. Il termine di ogni noda è un bivio. Cercando di creare una sequenza che si evolve di continuo e che non torna mai per le strade già percorse, l'esecutore personalizza la propria suonata. Proposta una certa noda, egli può infatti decidere di ripeterla con delle variazioni, di passare alla successiva o di saltarla e procedere oltre, di tornare momentaneamente su una noda suonata poco prima. È proprio in questo modo, conciliando l'estro e la creatività individuale con le regole imposte dalla tradizione, che ogni suonata diventa un evento unico e irripetibile.
This was the last example, and thank you for your attention.
Dear colleagues, good evening. My name is Dragana Stojanović, and by my primary profession, I'm an ethnomusicologist. Although in the recent few years, I have been dealing a lot more with the issues and topics of media and technology, because I'm working at Faculty of Media and Communication in Belgrade. I'm particularly happy to be a part of this conference that happens in such unusual times, because these times are really technology driven, and technology is rapidly becoming part of our daily lives, but also our professions. So I would like this presentation to be not only a talk about blockchain system and how it can help ethnomusicological field. I would like this presentation to be a vote for digital humanities and for all of us to go back to our disciplines so we can take the tools that we need for contemporary times. So, going from there, I would share my presentation with you because I think it's the most efficient way in these circumstances. And this could take some 10 seconds or so. Okay. So probably you're seeing the screen I'm seeing. And yes, today's topic will cover the role of blockchain technology in preserving, revitalizing, and dissemination of digitized sound heritage. But in order for us to understand how blockchain system really works, we should go back to some basic terms connected to the digital world and digital humanities. So, first of all, what is digitization and how do we see it? Usually we are seeing it in the more simple way than it actually is. We usually say that digitization is technological translation of an analog item into a digital one. But that could be far from its true complexity. Digitization, actually, if it works in a contemporary way, should be a process, an ongoing process of technological translation. Yes, it starts from technologically translating the analog item into a digital one, but then in order for it to be fully functional, we have to put it somewhere. We have to put it online, so it goes into an informational flow that is then connected to all the users and online culture. So it's a cultural issue. So it's an issue that us as ethnomusicologists have to grapple with. Also, these terms, digital, digitization, digitalization, are we fluent enough with them? Lots of sources are pointing out that it is not enough if we are just digitally literate. So if we just know what to do with technologies that we have. No, we have to be able to influence the development of the technology. And we can do it only if we go a step further towards digital humanities from our already present disciplines. Now, one more thing, the question of materiality in digital times, which will be especially important for blockchain system understanding. We have to know that although digital fields sometimes seems a bit immaterial, information is a main unit of materialization in digital space. And what does it have to do with the sound archives? Actually, sound archives might be closer than other archives to technology, because unlike other archives, what we as ethnomusicologists do is that we, in order to make the archives, even the most traditional ones, we already have to translate our field experience into technology. So we have to make recordings. So we are a bit closer to technology already. And that is why the question of technology application in digitized sound heritage should be considered one of the top priority issues in ethnomusicology. So if the sound archives are already so close to technology, then there is a question, do we have a problem at all? Yes, we might have a problem, because digitized units are quite a vulnerable territory. How? When we have a traditional archive, we have the full control over who is coming to us, and is it a researcher, and is the person going to do something professional with the recording? And if we are putting something online, we have no idea who the users might be and what they might do with our recordings. So I guess that a huge piece or portion of fear and unease that we can feel towards technology goes in that direction. And of course, we are worried about copying, about digital theft, about possible altering of our recordings, illegal misuse, abuse, and so on. And blockchain system can help us solve it. And we will see how. One more thing before it. We also have to be aware that our audiences will grow bigger once we put up the digital archive. When I say up, I mean internet. So these users might not be just researchers. If the archive is freely accessible, it might also be culture snackers, accidental passers-by, artists who are just looking for some inspiration for their material. And if we have to deal with ownership issues and our worry for professionalism when it comes to digitized sound heritage, that might be a problem. But technology can help. And it is particularly interesting that new archives are usually characterized as distributed databases, which is exactly the way how blockchain system works. So what is blockchain technology and how does it work? Blockchain technology is usually called a Janus-faced solution within digital humanities because it can bring us lots of benefits and solutions, but it can also face us with a completely new questions that we have to deal with. Blockchain system basically is consisted of distributed ledgers. So these are information that are cryptographically packed. So they're encrypted and packed into specific kind of blocks that get sued, and that makes them immutable. So in a practical kind of sense, if we put our digitized sound heritage into a blockchain-based archive, we are going to see what is happening with each and every item from the beginning, from when we put it to when someone downloads it or uses it or copies it or shares it. So anything that happens online gets tracked through blockchain. So how is it so? First of all, blockchain system was made for a financial field and the field of economy. So it was developed to enable safe transactions. Now, when we think about transactions, if we use blockchain within humanities, it doesn't have to be financial transaction. It can be just a transaction of the digital item we have to the user that will use it. So it's completely applicable to humanities. Then it's a decentralized system, which means that it eliminates third party, which makes it efficient and cost effective if it gets used. And what is most important for us is this tracking of information handling. And so what can exactly blockchain bring to digital sound archives? First of all, the issue of copying would be solved. The issue of copying is actually a lot more than it says in the digital world, because in the digital world, copies can be regarded as theft. It is a bit different than with material archives. With material archives, if something is stolen, we are going to notice it right away because it's not there anymore. But in the digital archive, if something gets copied and improperly or illegally used, we may be in a position not to notice it at all. So it's a huge issue to be solved, and blockchain can help in solving it. Also, the problem of immateriality of digital units with blockchain system solved. Human resources investment, that is something that is a contested field. Now, when we speak about blockchain system and archives, we don't need as much human professionals, as many human professionals as we needed in the traditional archives. Because if we wanted to come to traditional archive that is situated in some kind of a building, then we should go within working hours to meet a real human being, a professional that works as an archivist. But if we have an online archive, we can, using blockchain, solve everything through smart contracts, and we can define what the user can do with a specific recording. So the good thing is that it makes the archive available 24/7, which may be important to a lot of us in our professions. And the less good thing is that we may not need that many people as we needed. So that's a thing to think about. And this, of course, tracking of potential misuse is solved. What is new also with blockchain? It could create automated solidarity. It could create new audiences, new patrons, new participants, and that can all be a good thing if we decide to think about it that way. So what is the problem then? Still, blockchain leaves us with more questions than answers. Not everything is perfect with blockchain application to digital humanities and to ethnomusicological field too. One reason may be that blockchain technology is still new and not enough explored in different functional areas. And the other thing is that we will have to mobilize and renew our knowledge from the primary disciplines we are coming from. So what are actually the problems? One of the problems that is mentioned the most is the issue of commodification. Now, blockchain system was developed for financial assets, so it wasn't the problem there because we are already dealing with commodities. But if we speak about our cultural heritage, are we ready to call our recordings the commodities or objects of value, and which kind of value, and how would we define this value? And if we don't think about that, then we are in danger not to be ready and prepared for the questions of the market, of the digital field, and so on and so on. So lots of questions go back to this issue of commodification. Also, there is an issue with the question of freedom within digital sphere. So if the archive is freely accessible, does it have to mean that everything there is for free? And again, it goes back to putting up the value into our cultural heritage, but not the value as a concept, but the real value of the market. And that might be a thing that we want to think about. This is especially important. Currently, there is a huge lack of the dialogue between professionals in humanities and IT. And sometimes IT professionals are really trying to solve some issues, how they see it. But that might be something else than we, as people who come from the humanities, need. So it is utterly important for us to foster these dialogues so we could together help in developing technologies that will really be useful for us. And last but not the least, the blockchain system requires excessive energy consumption that can even influence global warming if it gets used more. And recently there has been some solutions to that, but we will still have to think about it responsibly. And I want now come to the conclusion. And I would like this conclusion actually to be a beginning point of our discussion, which I'm looking forward to very much. These are the books and texts I was reading. And if any one of you wants to have it, please contact me through the email and I will send it to you. I have it all in the digital format. So I will stop sharing now in order to hear what you may think about all this. And yes, and I would really like to hear all your questions, all your concerns, all your attitudes towards this blockchain technology and generally technological times. And yes, I'm looking forward to it. Let's go to this to the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, I bring you warm greetings from Accra, Ghana. My name is Judith Bocobotin, and I am very happy to have been invited by the Institute of Musicology to join you in the celebration of the World Day for Audiovisual Heritage. So thank you so much. Also to my colleague Marija, for facilitating this. I happen to be in the same international association with you and let you know that I'm happy to work with you. So I am speaking on the topic Tapping History to Rebuild the Future, J.H. Kwabena Nketia, and the Making of a Post-Colonial Archive. So I work in this very beautiful university called University of Ghana. It used to be called the University College of the Gold Coast, but later it was renamed to University of Ghana. And it's a premier university in the country, and it has a student population of over 39,000. And there are various faculties and various departments, within this fine university. It's a very big university, and because I work here, I should rate it above all the other universities in the country. Yes. So the J.H. Kwabena Nketia Archives operated within this university, one of the academic resource units of this fine institute, that is the Institute of African Studies within the University of Ghana. And it's a unit that contributes to the teaching, learning, and research activities of the Institute of African Studies. So the archive is engaged with preserving Ghana's cultural histories and traditional musical practices. It provides a valuable resource for local students and scholars and creates a site in which broader conversations about the country's cultural legacies are brought into the social political discourses. So the Institute, before I talk more about the Nketia Archives, I would like to say that the Institute of African Studies was founded in 1961 and officially opened in 1963. So this is a photo of the first president of the Republic of Ghana opening the institute. So when Nkrumah opened the institute, he actually taxed the institute in his speech, which is called the African Genius speech. I think it's on the internet. And he tasked the institute to conduct research in all aspects of cultural studies and the arts, and most importantly, to disseminate the findings of all these research activities. So these are of the people, the audience at the opening of the institute, and there we have Professor Nketia conducting an exhibition and then showing the first presidents around to see some exhibition. And one of the other resource facilities of the institute, which is the Ghana Dance Ensemble, also was escorting the first president, to the premises for him to give his speech. So, in order to reverse the effects of hegemony and decolonize archival methodology, Professor Nketia exerted efforts in strengthening collaboration between archives and indigenous communities. So the archive was named in honor of Nketia in 2015, as although the materials date as far back as 1950s, and it is the realization of over 6 decades of gathering data and visual data, acquiring new acquisitions, conducting research and preservation efforts. So the core, as I said earlier, was amassed by or under Professor Nketia during his extensive career shaping Ghana's cultural policy, building teaching and research institutions, and then studying music, culture, and language in Africa. So Nketia's quest for decolonization is clearly evident in his research expedition and his choice in the kind of data which he collected for the Institute's archive. And his convocation speech of 1963 stamps this Pan-Africanist view. And actually, this particular speech by Nketia has been the Nketia Archive's guiding principle. So in this speech, he states, and that's a very beautiful picture of him, and it says African traditional arts should be recorded, they should be preserved, they should be studied. But we believe also that they should not merely be studied, recorded, preserved, but practiced as living arts. We believe also that the art must develop and that the study of African traditions should inspire creative experiments in the African idiom, unquote. And this is Nketia, giving this speech in 1963 during the University of Ghana's convocation. So this 1963 quote, which is actually one of my favorites, reflects Nketiah's dedication to documenting and preserving African performing arts as part of the decolonization of higher education and knowledge production in Africa, as well as Nketiah's efforts in nation building. His vision, again, which is captured in his book, his 2016 book, Reinstating Traditional Music in Contemporary Context, which he wrote at the age of 1964, which he wrote, at the age of 94, whilst in the service of scholarly study, was also a political priority for promoting national integration and consciousness of the African identity undermined by colonialism. And this Nketiah Archives continues his vision and work in collecting, preserving, promoting, and disseminating knowledge of traditional music. So this is how the archive started. It started with just a collection, which is actually the core of the archives collection now. It started with quarter-inch open reels, where Nketiah was assisted by the head of department of the sociology department in 1952 to go to the field and collect music and dance for musical forms from all the regions of the country. By then they had 10 regions. So in an oral history interview with Nketiah, he stated that he wanted to have all the cultures in the country cooked in one pot and then shared to almost everybody. So for instance, somebody comes all the way from the eastern region, the person comes to the archive and learns about the cultures from the central region. Another person from the central region comes and learns about the culture from the Volta regions, and vice versa. So this was Nketiah's, vision. And I should say that this vision has been materialized, by the kind of materials that he and his colleagues, together with all his assistants collected, for the archive. So this gives you a very simple picture of the Nketiah archives. As I said, I was mentioning, colonization and all that. So we have managed, actually, when I took over as the archivist of this archive, my vision was also to make sure that Nketiah's vision of establishing the archive comes into fruition. So with the support of the institute, we managed to colonize the entire block, and we still keep expanding. The archive used to be just about a 2-unit facility. Now we have almost about an 8-unit facility, which comprises of an audiovisual paper repository, paper repository, manuscripts, Arabic manuscripts, Arabic and Ajami manuscripts, which I will mention briefly, and then again, there's a listening station and a viewing room where individuals can come in and listen to the materials or watch material from within the archives, because we are also within the School of Performing Arts, where students always come around to view the materials. Then again, we have a digitization laboratory, which was also set up when the archive was being refurbished. We have a listening station, we have a search room, and an inquiry room. And one very interesting room is an oral history or a cinematic studio, where we bring people, resource persons from the field, into this room to tap all the knowledge we record, and then we give them to interns to have them, transcribe So this photo gives you an idea of some of the collections that we keep in the archive. So besides the audiovisuals, as I said, we have Arabic and Ajami manuscripts of the Institute of African Studies, which is also one of such early initiatives by Ivor Wicks and Thomas Hodgkin, meant for preserving African history in its undiluted form. So most of the manuscripts were collected from areas such as the Salaga, Wa, Bundugu, Yendi, Katekrachi, and Kumasi, right? So additionally, the Nketia Archives preserves the Institute's administrative records, conference papers of scholars, personal papers of retired directors, personal files, and all that. This picture gives you an idea of the how we use the cinematic studio. So this is a musical group that came in, for a seminar, and we decided to, probe further about what they do by mounting a camera on them and then, conducting an interview with them. So the archive serves the university community. This is one of our major, tasks. We serve the university community, first and second cycle institutions in the country. They come in groups to find out about how we archive with, and then again learn about some students even are so curious that they even want to learn about the processes of converting analog formats or to digital formats, and then they also come in to watch stories, storytelling sessions that have been collected, way back, and they watch documentaries and all that. Some schools also call us, so we go with the whole crew, and then we mount boards for them to watch some of the material from the archive. We again invite archivists from all over to come and even learn about basic formats, within the archive and all that. So the archive is also very rich with donations from visiting scholars from different parts of the world, especially from Africa, and people who are conducting research in Africa, digitized records of renowned local archives, such as the Boko High Life Archive by Professor John Collins. In actual fact, we have inherited John Collins. Again, this also gives you an idea of the kinds of things we do. So the archive still collects. It just does not rely on what we have. We still collect almost every month, right? So we liaise with the communities, and then they call us and say, oh, there's a very interesting funeral going on, funerals of royals, can you come? So there's a crew that is connected to the archive, that is the archives of the visual unit. So they, together with the research fellows, go to the field, and some of us, myself and some of my other colleagues also join, and then we go and so collect materials from almost all the communities. So almost every time we collect African traditional arts, and then we bring them to the archive. So this also gives you an idea of some photos that we keep. This photo on the left, which has now been cleaned and digitally cleaned. I don't have that picture now with me. So it's these are female impersonators in some of the concert parties. So these are males who pose as females, right, during the concert party, because there were no females in the concert party. The men had to act as men. These are things that young children come to the archive to learn about. Pictures about hairstyles and festivals and chief installations. And through this project, we managed to collect so many materials on audio, and we have them digitized as well, and we made them accessible on site. We've not yet put them online. And besides this project, the archives has again been involved in other projects, such as the Heritage Photo Lab, for instance. This is a recent project. I actually call it a COVID project because we started planning it during the COVID period, just before COVID hit. But and during COVID, we were just still running the project. And we collected photos from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then we made them We cleaned them from individuals and institutions. We cleaned them, digitized them, and made them available throughout a huge exhibition mounted in the museum in downtown Accra. And it was sponsored by the Goethe Institute and Institut Français with the support from the French German Fund. So apart from this, the archive has also been involved in training programs. We were fortunate to have hosted at SOIMA 2017, organized by International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, that is ICROM. We hosted the training program in Accra. We had people coming in, participants and trainers coming in from all over the world, and they spent about 2 weeks in the archive, where we trained them on all that one needs to know about archiving. Again, recently in 2018, the archive or the Institute of African Studies, actually through the archive, hosted the International Association of Sound and Audiovisual Archives conference in 2018, and we had so many people coming in from all over the world, to the University of Ghana for this very conference. Again, we just hosted the immediate past, the YASA 2021 conference. We're one of the host institutions. We just passed. So we have been involved in all kinds of projects and training programs and conferences and going. So I'm sure one may ask you, I recently talked about how we have strengthened our resilience, through COVID and all that, how, we've managed to cope with all the COVID issues and all that. We use the COVID situation as an incubation period where we decided to grow the collection. So the Heritage Photo Lab I told you about is one of the projects that we use to grow the collection. Then again, we try to close the gap between archives and creators. So we invited some creators, to come to the archive and see how we could bond with them for them to use some of the old collection to recreate. Then again, we have the archives and archive projects where we are we keep inheriting archive from individuals who can't really take good care of the collections. We are still almost every day inheriting archives, from individuals and the people who are also past, from scholars and musicians and artists and all that. And we use the opportunity again to develop library guides and then to entice students about how they can use quote audiovisual resources in academic research. And one very important thing we're doing is to strengthen weaker archives, within the country. So we go to some of the archives which need help, and then we also share the little knowledge we have with them. And again, we train young people and even students who are in information studies and want to learn more about archiving. So this is what the archive has been, involved in. And I want to use the opportunity to say thank you very much for the opportunity to share what we have. I will end here, and I will leave open. I think the floor will be open for me to for you to ask questions. So I am here, and once again, I thank you so much for the opportunity to be involved in the World Day for Audiovisual Heritage. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Before assuming the coordination of the installation team of the National Sound Archive of Portugal, I was part of the research team that drew up the FADO proposal to UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage. Since 2005 until 2012, I was responsible for conducting fieldwork and discographic research. Fado was enlisted in November 2011, and 5 years later, the first fully digital sound archive was published online with more than 4,000 items dating back from 1904 until 1960. After several years of fieldwork, I gained the trust of practitioners, some of them with half a century of activity associated to Fado. These people were my friends and true masters. As I said, as time on the field went by, I came across comments that intrigued me. Sometimes the comments were more articulated, others mere insinuations, but always the same recurrent issue. As someone once told me, if the professor told you so, who am I to say otherwise? Yes, I was intrigued, but I have to say, not surprised. Let me stop for a moment to give you some important notes. There are three main types of fado repertoire. First, there are fados de estilo. 3 fados where you have a minimal melodic line upon which the musician has to create his personal interpretation that has to be based, but never limited to it. A new melody, recognizable, but different. Secondly, fados tradicionais, a set of more than 300 melodies that the community of practice knows and recognizes. The singer can use any melody to perform any lyric whose stanzas fits on the melodic line. And lastly, fados canção, a conventional popular song where each lyric has its own melody. My ethnographic and discographic work focus on the first two groups, fados de estilo and traditional fados. Let me give you an example. Fado corrido. It is one of the fados de estilo and a well-known melody. In its minimal form, it sounds like this. And the singer can do something like this.
É numa rua bizarra, a casa de mariquinhas. Tem na sala uma guitarra, janelas com tabuinhas. Tem na sala uma guitarra, janelas com tabuinhas. Vivo com muito.
The most knowledgeable performers, inventive and conscious of their physical characteristics, can do something like this. The same lyric, same fado, same performer, but 3 decades later.
É numa rua bizarra, a casa da mariquinha. E tem na sala uma guitarra, janelas com tabuinhas. Tem na sala uma guitarra, janelas com tabuinhas.
In a performative context, a singer asks the guitarist to play a certain melody, calling it by the melody name. Sometimes the guitarist doesn't know which melody the singer is referring to because, for instance, he calls it by another name. That could be the title of one poem or its first stanza. I would like to give you another set of examples. Fado da Meia-Noite, a traditional fado composed by Filipe Pinto in the early 30s. We can listen to him singing Fado da Meia-Noite with the poem Desespero. The community of practice will recognize it as being Fado da Meia-Noite.
Outrora lembro-me bem as ilusões de floria. Outrora lembro-me bem as ilusões de floria. E quando meus lábios riam, meus olhos riam também. E quando meus lábios riam, meus olhos riam também. Sem ver que os anos consomem.
Let's hear another performance, 4 decades later, the same Fado da Meia-Noite, in this case sung by Camané, with the title Escada Sem Corrimão.
É uma escada em caracol e que não tem corrimão. É uma escada em caracol e que não tem corrimão. Vai a caminho do sol, mas nunca passa do chão. Vai a caminho do sol.
And lastly, once again, Fado da Meia-Noite, this time sung by Aldina Duarte, in a track called Deste-me Tudo o que Tinhas.
Deste-me tudo o que tinhas nos meus lençóis de cetim. Deste-me tudo o que tinhas nos meus lençóis de cetim. Mais a raiva quando vinhas desencontrado de mim. Mais a raiva quando vinhas desencontrado de mim.
Now, picture yourself working at the archive, that source of authority. You should catalog the tracks as Desespero by Filipe Pinto, Escada Sem Corrimão by Camané, and Deste-me Tudo o que Tinhas by Aldina Duarte, and no association whatsoever between the three, even if they were performing the same traditional fado. Of course, this one, for practical reasons, is quite easier to trace. Others, not so famous melodies, are quite hard to associate, and even the community doesn't fully agree which melody is being sung. At the same time, especially after the fado elitization, new singers and instrumentalists that are emerging have a very few to no involvement with the community of practice. Most of them learn their repertoire from a CD or by reading a couple of books. Knowledge, in fact, is being erased by the archives, monographs, and successful CDs. At the archive, a tragic scientific plot is taking place. What is being archived and documented with their own officers, archivists, ethnomusicologists, anthropologists, historians, in fact, all those gatekeepers and sacred institutions of knowledge act in such a way that have a critical impact on future representation. The act of recording, archiving, documenting, studying, and publishing has been the privilege of a group of officers, imposing their technical expertise and their theoretical weapons. I know this problem has been assumed by academia since the early 80s, calling attention to the poetics and politics of science. Nevertheless, this tragic, heavy machinery of social construction of scientific facts impact on people's knowledge and practice. Heritage processes doesn't help either. Intangible heritage rarely articulates as it should with tangible assets. Most of the time, they remain unarticulated, or, at its best, poorly articulated. Discs and knowledge usually take different paths. And on the mobile, the community of practice keeps asking for information. Information that was not available on the shellac labels. And they understand the sad perception of the tragic impact of academia doxa on community's knowledge. So, for that reason, I designed Editamos. With that project, a group of people from different provenances and research contexts, with 2 associated partners, decided to design and test a tool to give voice to people usually taken away from those authority places like archives or monographs. With Editamos, we recognize the full rights, autonomy, and agency to any actor, being it human or non-human, a disc or a musician. Our main goal was to ground research on an intense dialogue between human actors, like musicians, with non-human actors, like 78 RPM shellac discs, knowing from the start that all of them played an equally decisive role in shaping the musical genre, its community, history, music materials, practice, and identity. With Editamos, we wanted to see all actors as activists, as entities with a reason to act, with more or less complex agendas associated with a network of constraints, social, cultural, identitarian, economic, and so on, whose action is mainly guided to construct an idea of legitimacy, authenticity, and value. We were not trying in any way to look for the truth. We were not trying to look for what was right or what was wrong. We were not trying to solve controversies. We were just trying to map actors and actions, identifying controversies as they appear and mapping mobilized friends and foes. We picked up the Museu do Fado collection and put it together an experimental laboratory based on cooperative interaction between researchers and stakeholders to curate data, promoting fluid assemblages of improbable objects, structuring the community's knowledge and things. The process was absurdly simple. A computer with the digitized items, a piece of virtual white paper, and a virtual pen. At the time, I made a couple of videos I want to play for you. The first is on how to design a graph. The second on how to retrieve information. Let me show you how easy it is to design a graph with Editamos. Go to the website and press the button Start using Editamos to get to the options Browse, Start, Open, or Import a graph. Let's create a new one. The first step is to search if the node we want already exists. Let's start with one that already exists, and to establish the relationship, let's create another node that doesn't exist. And let's define that this node is a song. And we have the 2 nodes. To establish the relationship, just select one of the nodes and pressing the right button of the mouse, just draw a line between the nodes and establish what kind of relationship it is, in this case composed by. And you have the relationship Fado 1 was composed by Armandinho. In order to retrieve the information, you just have to click on Browse General Graph, select a starting point, in this case Fado Macau, and the number of nodes you want to see on the screen. In this case, let's say all the nodes with 2 degrees of separation from Macau tune. And there you have. You can see on the screen, you can zoom out and zoom in and move to see the tune, the songs that use the tune, the recorded tracks, the lyrics, and the persons who sang the tune. In a time of intense debate around decolonizing the archive and community archivism, I tend to question myself. Are we doing enough? Are we doing the right thing? I don't have any clear-cut answer to that. I believe we are all trying our best to mobilize people, communities, friends and foes to help us to improve our archivist action. But I would like to wrap up with some ideas that resulted from my Eritamos experience. Any process has to be as simple as possible, reducing everything to minimal elements of information, using a simple and clear interface. And as the first results appear on the screen, we always get this kind of haha moment when people grasp the process as a nice emulation of their thinking. Today, the source code is published at GitHub with a Creative Commons license. The French team is planning to adapt artificial intelligence to learn and generate automatic possible associations. Another team is implementing natural language queries. One of our IT people is continuously publishing nice and unexpected queries with a structure he says it is elegant. And for me, my vision for the future at the National Sound Archive, we will adopt that cooperative curation strategy because we know that the community and each of its members knows much more than all the pages ever written. Thank you.